Tony Stark may be gone, but the Marvel Cinematic Universe has a brand new iron-suited protector. Black Panther Wakanda Forever introduced us to Riri Williams, aka Ironheart. As the MCU's newest hero, Riri is sure to have plenty of supervillains who will be ready to take her on, including several faces from Tony Stark's rogues gallery. Let's take a look at which villains Ironheart could fight in the MCU. Let's start off this list with a villain who has already been officially confirmed to face off against Riri. Parker Robbins, aka the Hood, is an incredibly powerful crime lord who wears a mystical hood and boots that originally belonged to Dormammu. After taking possession of these belongings, Robbins used his newfound powers to cement himself as a major player in the New York underworld. The Hood is notable for his influence in the worlds of both ordinary organized crime and costume villainy, and he leads a massive crime syndicate made up of supervillains. Robbins will be making his MCU debut in the Ironheart Disney Plus series, where he'll be played by actor Anthony Ramos. The show will highlight the contrast between Riri's technologically advanced exploits and the Hood's use of dark magic, and I think this major difference between the two will make for some very compelling encounters. The MCU's always treated magic and technology quite differently, so it'll be cool to see what will happen when these two forces finally confront each other. As I mentioned earlier, the Hood is an important villain in the overall lore of Marvel Comics, so it would be great to see him continue to appear in the MCU after the Ironheart show finishes airing. He would make for a fun recurring villain for Riri throughout her various appearances, and his criminal operations could cross over into the world of someone like Spider-Man or Daredevil. No matter what, you can expect the Hood to bring some much needed mystical firepower into the MCU. Let's just hope those iron suits of Riri's are up to Tony Stark standards. We've talked about Doctor Doom and his inevitable MCU debut plenty of times in the past, especially in relation to the Fantastic Four's upcoming solo film. However, there's plenty of other heroes that the ruler of Latveria could also fight when he finally shows his masked face, and a matchup between him and Ironheart could be one of the most unexpectedly epic battles we've ever seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Similarly to the Hood, Doom is another character who is heavily involved in the realm of mysticism and magic, having been trained since a young age by powerful sorcerers like Morgan Le Fay and Mephisto. But one of the biggest things that makes Doom stand out as a villain is his ability to combine the worlds of magic and technology. Sure, he's a highly skilled magic user, but Doom also boasts numerous scientific and technological achievements. These include, but are not limited to, his suits of armor, the Time Platform, and his Doombots, robotic copies of him that frequently serve as decoys, as well as his personal army. In short, Doom is simultaneously one of the Marvel Universe's strongest sorcerers and greatest scientific minds. Given the fact that Riri Williams is basically being set up as a successor to Tony Stark, another one of the world's greatest scientific geniuses, some sort of confrontation between her and Doctor Doom feels inevitable. Now, I'm in no way suggesting that I think Riri could beat or even really stand much of a chance at all against Doom, but considering the fact that we never got to see Tony himself facing off against Victor, Ironheart feels like the next best candidate. If the rumors that Doctor Doom had something to do with Namor's invasion of Wakanda ultimately end up being proven true, this would also give the two a personal connection that would set the stage for their eventual showdown. I am pretty sure that Ironheart will get her butt kicked should that ever happen, but this would motivate her to continue improving her suits and learning lessons from her mistakes, while also establishing Victor Von Doom as one of the most powerful figures of phases 5 and 6. Ironheart has a, shall we say, complicated relationship with Namor the Submariner in the MCU. The ruler of Talokan spent almost the entirety of Wakanda Forever trying to capture and kill Riri in order to keep the existence of his kingdom secret. Luckily for our new iron-suited hero, Shuri was able to rally the forces of Wakanda and strike a peace treaty with Namor, albeit a very uneasy one that I wouldn't be surprised to see broken in future films. Above all else, Namor values the privacy and secrecy of his kingdom. That's why he waged all-out war with Wakanda, exposing his kingdom to them in the process when they didn't know about them before.
Okay, that didn't really make sense, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Comic fans will know how important of a character the Submariner is in the overall Marvel universe, and it's only a matter of time until we see him again. I would imagine that, despite his truce with Wakanda, Namor would still want to capture Riri, in order to ensure that none of her technology ever threatens his kingdom again. This goal will only become more and more difficult to achieve as Ironheart meets more fellow superheroes who will have her back. I'm gonna assume Marvel's ultimate goal for Riri is to have her join the MCU's Young Avengers, but I doubt that even they will do much to dissuade Namor from his goal. I foresee his and Riri's next encounter to be incredibly tense and hostile, with the two of them locking horns in a rematch before eventually realizing that they need to put aside their differences and team up against an outside force that poses a greater threat than they've ever seen, like maybe a certain armor-wearing ruler of Latveria. The main villain of Iron Man 2 was Justin Hammer, a weapons dealer and bratty rival to Tony Stark. Hammer was primarily motivated by a constant desire to one-up Tony, which of course ended up blowing up in his face and causing him to be sent to prison. It's been almost a decade since we last saw Hammer in the MCU, and the Ironheart series provides a perfect opportunity for him to slither back onto our screens. He may have missed his opportunity to have a rematch with Tony, but the childish inventor could move on to Riri as his next target of humiliation, ironically proving that a teenager has far more maturity than he ever will. I could see Hammer returning with his daughter Justine at his side, with the two working together to reinvigorate their family name. In the comics, Justine is better known as the supervillain the Crimson Cowl, and their MCU versions could ally with a certain other red-hooded villain in an attempt to return to the spotlight, only for their villainy to once again be exposed and defeated. The two could then continue on to appear in other projects like the Thunderbolts or Armor Wars movies, but let's not get too ahead of ourselves. First things first, Riri would be the perfect foil for Justin Hammer as he attempts to make his grand return, and it would be pretty cathartic to see him be humiliated by someone half his age and double his intelligence. The Ten Rings were the very first villains we ever met in the MCU, and without them, Tony Stark probably never would have become Iron Man. After Tony escaped his captors and blew up their base, the Ten Rings went out of focus in the MCU for over a decade, finally returning with a vengeance in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. That film saw the titular hero taking on his own father, the Mandarin, as well as the rest of his organization, and by the time the credits rolled, Shang-Chi's sister, Jia Ling, had taken the reins of the Ten Rings. To me, one of the MCU's biggest missed opportunities is the fact that Iron Man never had a rematch with the true Ten Rings. However, their journeys have always been on somewhat parallel paths, and never has that been more noticeable than in Phase 4. While Riri has just recently taken up the Iron Mantle, Jia Ling is still settling into her role as leader. It's a new era for both the Ten Rings and Earth's Iron Protector, and because of this, I think it's a great time to reignite their feud. A fight between Ironheart and the Ten Rings would finally pay off the loose end set up by the first Iron Man movie, while also symbolically demonstrating just how far the MCU has come since then. The MCU's Spider-Man is inextricably tied to Tony Stark, with several of his major villains having connections to either Tony himself or Stark Industries. Now, Spider-Man No Way Home may have erased any memories or personal relationship between Peter and Tony, but there's one particular comic book villain that could bring Spidey back into the world of Iron, and allow him to meet and team up with Riri ahead of Secret Wars. That villain is Carolyn Traynor, the right-hand woman and successor to Dr. Octopus. After Octavius temporarily died in the comics, don't worry, he got better. Traynor built her own set of mechanical arms and used them to carry on the Dr. Octopus name until he returned. While the MCU may not have their own Doc Ock, instead having to borrow the one from the Raimi series, Carolyn could still easily appear as someone who's inspired to become a supervillain by Octavius's brief rampage. Suiting up as a new Dr. Octopus, she could seek out her idol in the hopes that he'll take her under his wing, of course not realizing that he's since returned to his own universe. But how could this involve Riri? Well, when we met her in Wakanda Forever, she was a student at MIT, so I don't see why Traynor couldn't be adapted as a classmate of hers. While Riri focuses on the iron suits, Carolyn focuses on her arms, with the two of them eventually coming to blows. Peter could be wrapped up in their conflict while checking in on both MJ and Ned from afar, because as we learned in No Way Home, they both got accepted into MIT as well. The introduction of Carolyn would give us a great legacy villain who shares quite a bit in common with Riri, and also, of course, it would provide Sony with another villain to add to their Sinister Six. If that's even the plan anymore. Who am I kidding? They haven't given up on that in 8 years. They're certainly not going to give up on it now.
The power of
sequels
in the palm of my hand.
Ezekiel Stane is the son of Obadiah Stane, Tony Stark's former business partner and his first real supervillain opponent. After his failed attempt to have the Ten Rings assassinate Tony, Obadiah suited up as the Ironmonger and tried to take care of business himself. Of course, he failed in this, but almost 15 years later, I think it's finally time for his son to show up in the MCU and carry on his father's goals. In the comics, Ezekiel is driven by a blinding hatred for Tony Stark and all of his friends and allies, having masterminded several elaborate schemes to rid the world of Iron Man as revenge for his father's death. Obviously, Tony's already gone by the time of the Ironheart series, but that likely just means that Stane will be shifting targets to Riri. Obadiah's whole motivation in the first Iron Man revolved around claiming Tony's company, and more importantly, his fame, for himself. Now that Tony's gone, I could see the younger Stane stepping in to try to usurp his empire, essentially trying to tear down the Stark name and build up the Stane family in its place. Riri's not a direct member of Tony's family, but as the new holder of the Iron Mantle, it would be up to her to take down Ezekiel and prevent him from staining Tony's legacy. Similarly to how the Young Avengers will be made up of a number of youthful characters adopting the identities of OG MCU heroes, Ezekiel could be one of several young villains doing the same thing. He would be a great candidate to serve as the leader of a younger Masters of Evil, alongside Justin Hammer, Sin, Nicholas Scratch, and maybe even Thane, the son of Thanos. No matter what, the introduction of Ezekiel Stane would be a welcome reminder of the MCU's first installment, and it would be really fun to give Ironheart a more grounded recurring arch-nemesis as we move forwards through the multiverse saga. Now, I know I just spent the entirety of the last entry talking about how Riri is our best option to succeed Tony Stark, despite not actually being a Stark. But what if I told you that there actually is another member of his family who could become the Marvel Cinematic Universe's new Iron Man? Now what if I told you he was not a hero, but was instead a power-hungry world conqueror? Yes, Arno Stark is Tony's long-lost brother, who is raised away from the rest of his family due to his poor health, as well as the influence of a robotic alien.
This is starting to sound like a bad comic book plot.
Upon reaching adulthood, Arno made contact with Tony, and the two brothers began working on a plan to turn Earth into a technological utopia. However, as time passed, it became clear that Arno was a truly warped and unstable person, whose goal eventually evolved into taking over the world and creating a massive robotic army. Luckily for us, Tony managed to defeat his brother and lock him away in a virtual simulation, where he finally managed to become the grand hero that he always saw himself as. When it comes to the MCU, Arno's debut could really throw a wrench into things and totally switch up the way we think about the Stark family. The reveal that they have another son who's been mistreated and essentially thrown away while Tony spent his life basking in his family's successes would put a much darker lens on the Stark Empire, and it would also definitely generate some sympathy for Arno. A backstory like his would make anyone bitter and vengeful, and Riri will have to confront the sins of the Starks in the most tangible way possible, finding some way to both honor Tony's heroism and correct the injustices suffered by his brother. The only real issue with this story idea is that it's a bit close to what's already been done with Killmonger. But Arno is such a complex character that there's lots of different ways to make him stand out as one of Ironheart's most powerful potential foes. One of Marvel's stranger villains is M.O.D.O.K, or the mental organism designed only for killing. His real name is George Tarleton, and he was originally a scientist for AIM who was experimented on by his own employers, causing him to go through some, shall we say, drastic physiological changes. With his transformation complete, M.O.D.O.K became a foe of the Avengers, seeking to do a bunch of evil sciencey stuff, and generally serving as a thorn in the side of Earth's mightiest heroes. He's become a bit of a meme icon for Marvel fans over the years, right up there alongside Big Wheel and Stiltman in the pantheon of villains that are so weird and dumb that they loop back around again to being cool. At long last, M.O.D.O.K will finally be making his first MCU appearance in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. It's been heavily rumored that Darren Cross, aka Yellow Jacket, will be revealed as the one in the hover chair for this particular outing, with his bizarre new appearance coming as a result of having been forcibly shrunk into the quantum realm. Should he survive the events of that threequel, I think it would be great to have M.O.D.O.K take over AIM, which we were first introduced to in Iron Man 3. As for what he'd want with Ironheart, she's already proven herself to be one of the MCU's smartest characters, so I could see Cross wanting to use Riri's technological expertise to either upgrade his hover chair or find a way to turn him back into a normal person. This conflict could also lead to a team-up between Riri and the Ant family. Is that a thing? Whatever, that's what I'm calling them, with her smarts proving to be invaluable in their continued studies into the quantum realm. And, of course, we can't talk about upcoming MCU villains without talking about Kang. This time-traveling conqueror will be making his presence felt throughout phases 5 and 6, and his seemingly endless number of variants make it so that he can show up at any time, in any place, on any universe he wants to. However, one of Kang's most intriguing variants is actually a hero, a younger version of him called Iron Lad. Kang had previously traveled backwards in time in order to try and convince his younger self to become a villain sooner. But instead he had the opposite effect and caused this teenage variant to become an armored superhero who founded the Young Avengers. Now, I don't think that Iron Lad will have a major role in the Ironheart series, but I can't help but feel that Marvel has a golden opportunity to team these two young heroes up at some point. Maybe in the very last episode of Ironheart, Riri can be relaxing after finally having defeated the Hood and settled into her new superheroic role, only for a portal to pop open behind her, allowing Iron Lad to step through. Riri asks him who he is and what's going on, and Iron Lad tells her that he needs her help to defeat himself. Cut to black, roll credits, and there we go. A perfect way to set up a team up between these two in either the Kang Dynasty or Ironheart Season 2. Plus, easy foreshadowing for the Young Avengers as well. Marvel, if any of you guys are listening out there, you can use this idea, no problem. Just back up a dump truck full of gold coins to my house and we've got a deal. at least enough for me to swim through them like Scrooge McDuck. Hey everybody, I'm Sonnack. I made this video and I'd like to thank you for watching it. Which villains would you like to see Ironheart fight in the MCU? Let me know in the comments below and make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one!